chosen.
Hello everyone. This video is about the Ukraine Gate issue with Donald Trump. Basically, I've had some difficulty coming to a exact position as far as the legality of Trump's actions. On one hand, I saw that he communicated to the Ukraine president in such a way as to imply that if the corruption scandal with Biden's son is investigated properly, then weapons will continue to be sold to Ukraine. That could be inferred from the phone call, though it's a little bit of a reach. On the other hand, I see the incentive for impeachment by Trump's opponents, and I've observed that the definition of whistleblower seems to have been stretched a little bit to include second-hand and third-hand informant. This tweet by Matt Beebe basically goes on to suggest that what we're seeing in the media with regards to this issue is a giant intelligence operation. So I'll read to you this Twitter thread. The ongoing Democrat info op /psyop is starting to unravel. At Sean M. Dave and at Ben Shapiro have touched on it with some of their tweets today, but that's the tip of the iceberg. The collusion that has been underway by the likes of Schiff and the Deep State, IC, is shocking. Military planners euphemistically use the term shaping the battlefield as they engage in full spectrum operations to, hopefully, win without firing a shot. Misinformation campaigns, etc. are all a part of this, but it takes careful preparation. Let's see how it applies here. Let's first look at the whistleblower process and how an urgent concern is to be reported. As recently as May 2018, the instructions for ICWP Form 410, that's a whistleblower complaint, included the admonition that, quote, first-hand information was required for a report to be processed. He reproduced the text from this report, and it shows here in the first sentence, the ICIG must be in possession of a reliable first-hand information. Matt admonishes us, read carefully. If you think that wrongdoing took place, but can provide nothing more than second-hand or unsubstantiated assertions, ICIG will not be able to process the complaint or information for submission as an ICWPA. Wow, seems straightforward. And that sentence can be found here. It's the last sentence. Would not be able to process the complaint or information for submission to the ICWPA. So it's that same sentence. But hey, you might say that the current official form on DNI's website has no such preamble. So it's okay to use hearsay now? Seems very convenient that it was just updated in August 2019. Move along, nothing to see here. Now let's go to that file. So this is the disclosure form on dni.gov. Now looking through this form, you can see here at the bottom that it says revision : August 2019. So it was just changed. Continuing on. So someone in the ICIG DNI revised the procedures to make it easier to process a complaint based on hearsay. The statute still doesn't permit it, but we'll come back to that. This was done in August of 2019, right as the whistleblower's report was being vetted. Convenient, eh? Incredibly, it gets worse. On 23rd September, 4 days ago, and before the complaint was processed, the Congressional Record Service made an extensive update to their publication on intelligence community whistleblower protections. The link's here. So we're just going to go ahead and go to that link. And so yeah, this is Congressional Research Service, the community whistleblower protections. It shows it was updated on the 23rd of September of this year. Continuing on, the previous version of this publication was released on 13th of December 2018. Strange to make an extensive update when there has been zero legislative action to update statute since then. The prior version is here. So let's go take a look at the prior version. And so the previous version was December 13th, 2018. It's the last update prior to the most recent one. Let's compare. Incredibly, before the report was released, CRS saw fit to provide significant additional insight into what an urgent concern was under the statute. Neat that they're Johnny on the spot with such a fast-moving train, huh? The prior version used the term urgent concern twice. The current version uses it 10 times. The term has been around since at least 1998 when the ICWP was codified. Before the report was released to Congress, the CRS researcher thought this might need more explanation. Odd. What else changed? They add multiple pages on the means for addressing disagreements that may arise between ICIG and DNI that were authorized in the FY 2010 IAA, but for some reason weren't relevant to include in the CRS analysis before the middle of this month. And how did the nonpartisan CRS explain the statute to Congress and staff, who wouldn't dive deeper to see if it was misleading them in an underlying statute? Glad you asked. CRS cites chapter and verse from 50 U.S.C. Code 3033 in footnotes for the majority of their analysis, except for 3 paragraphs when they discuss ICIG's conditional authority to report directly to Congress. Let's take a look at the first 2 because of a sleight of hand is obvious. Okay, so the rest of this thread gets a little heady and difficult to follow, so we're going to slow down and just look over these references that he gives us. So this text you see here is basically derived from the September 23rd update of the ICWP report. So let's compare the update and the previous revision now. All right, so this is the September 23rd update. I'm going to scroll down to the relevant section. Okay, so this section is Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2010. Let's compare that to the previous version. So this is the previous version from December of last year. Note how it is about 1 page long. At the bottom of the text, you do not see the phrase urgent concern. The newer version, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and you have this phrase here. Although the statute gives IG authority for determining the credibility of a whistleblower complaint, it is not specific on who has the authority for determining whether a complaint, aside from its credibility, constitutes a matter of urgent concern. Now let's go to the place in the revision where this text can be found. So this is the relevant section in the newest revision, and just so you can compare, see finally 2010 IAA, finally 2010 IAA. So you see that text there. Okay, and then from here you scroll to the next page and you have the paragraph ending with the term urgent concern. So scrolling down to the next tweet, he says this: look carefully. The bullets that are not footnoted in the above screenshot relate to those conditions. Indeed, the omission of the footnote is intention to mislead. Why do we know this? Look at 50 U.S.C., and that's the full reference there. And he highlights a specific portion of III. A matter requires a report by the Inspector General to the Department of Justice on possible criminal conduct by a current or formal official described in Clause 2, or II. So now I'll take you to the relevant section in the U.S. Code. This is the code as produced on the Cornell Law School website. Alright, so here's III. A matter requires a report by Inspector General to the Department of Justice on possible criminal conduct by a current or formal official described in Clause 2. So, in the context of this portion here, this is under 3A. So it says in the event that. Continuing to scroll up. Scrolling up to 2 Part B, we have the language that appeared in the ICPA report. I'll read B. The director shall transmit to the Congressional Intelligence Community each report under subparagraph A within 7 calendar days of the receipt of such report, with such comments as the director considers appropriate. The director shall transmit to the committees of the Senate of the House of Representatives with jurisdiction over the Department of the United States government any portion of each report under subparagraph A that involves a problem, abuse, deficiency related to the component of such department simultaneously with transmission of the report to the Congressional Intelligence Committee. So in short, this is the portion of the code that specifies that a report has to be produced to the Congressional Intelligence Committee, which is, of course, in Congress. Before we were just reading III. Now, moving up to II, this describes the individual for which the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community is going to make a report to the Department of Justice. So the main thing is the qualifications of the individual are that he has to be a formal intelligence community official, and it lays out his particulars there. So continuing on with Matt's statements. Stick with me. The omission of described in clause II is essential to understanding the game they're playing here. What type of person does clause 2 II describe? Precisely 3 categories of people, none of which would include real Donald Trump. And so this is the portion that I just read to you. And these are the particulars that describes the official. Holds or held a position in an element of intelligence community and is subject to appointment by the president, whether or not by and with advice and consent of the Senate, including the position held on an acting basis. Holds or has held a position in an element of the intelligence community, including a position held on an acting basis that is appointed by a director of national intelligence, or holds or held a position as head of an element of the intelligence community, or a position covered by subsection B or C of section 3041 of this title. So then Matt says, let that sink in. Congressional authority does not include the right to receive this type of whistleblower report, period. Is that good law? Arguable, but it is the law. CRS is intentionally misleading Congress and the public to facilitate this usurpation of authority. So here is Matt's contention in a nutshell, as I understand it. The bottom part of section 5 here says, Inspector General shall immediately notify and submit a report to the Congressional Intelligence Committee on such matter. And the matter being the situation where the Director of National Intelligence and Inspector General are not able to resolve differences on a specific matter. The investigation goes into finding out about a formal intelligence community official. So CRS, the Congressional Research Service, states that the DNI needed to transmit a report to them pretty much immediately because there's an official to be investigated, as disclosed with the whistleblower report. The Congressional Research Service created a new revision of the previous ICWP report, where they now relied on this new section of the U.S. Code to define the circumstances of more urgent report transmittal. But in the revision, they de-emphasized the fact that that portion of the code was specifically in reference to intelligence community officials. These officials may be appointed by the president, however, they're not the president. So continuing on with Matt here. The third paragraph without a footnote, it's highly debatable editorial comment, passing off as a statutory interpretation to give Schiff and others even more cover to mislead their fellow congressmen and American public. And so here he quotes from that specific passage of the revision that mentions the term urgent concern. Although the statute gives the IG authority for determining the credibility of whistleblower complaint, it is not specific on who has the authority for determining whether a complaint, aside from its credibility, constitutes a matter of urgent concern. As a reminder, that portion is found right here on the revision. This is the second page. Sorry, this is the third page. This is the part that begins for that specific passage. Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2010. Odd. The timing and substance of the differences in the CRS documents facilitate a particular partisan narrative that the ICIG can forward a report to Congress about the president and color it an urgent concern under the statute when the statute, in fact, says no such thing. So I did a search term urgent concern search within this portion of the U.S. Code. Here are the instances where it appears. So there's this specific paragraph here where they say an employee of an element of the intelligence community, an employee assigned or detailed to an element of the intelligence community who intends to report to Congress a complaint with respect to urgent concern may report such complaint to the Inspector General. So that's one. Whoops. And here are the other two instances. It's urgent concern in quotes here and then once down there. Folks, this is an attempted coup. The executive branch is by no means perfect, but if the rule of law is to mean anything moving forward, we cannot allow the legislative branch to usurp this authority and toss constitutional checks and balances aside because Orange Man bad. +1 on the Congressional Research Service's editorial note, they claim it is not specific on who has the authority for determining whether a complaint, aside from its credibility, constitutes a matter of urgent concern. Except the statute is explicit. Congress has defined it. So then he quotes a passage from the code again. We're going to go to that section. And that's right here where there are the highlights for urgent concern. So urgent concern is defined as a serious or flagrant problem, abuse, violation of law or executive order or deficiency relating to the funding, administration, or operation of intelligence community, intelligence activity within the responsibility and authority of the Director of National Intelligence involving classified information, but does not include differences of opinion concerning public policy matters. A false statement to Congress or willful withholding from Congress on an issue of material fact relating to funding, administration, or operation of intelligence activity. An action including a personnel action described in this specific section constituting reprisal or threat of reprisal prohibited under subsection that's given of this section in response to an employee's reporting an urgent concern in accordance with this paragraph. So I linked through to this section of the code which describes exactly what a personnel action means. So you see it's an appointment, a promotion, an action under a different chapter, detailed transfer, reassignment, reinstatement, restoration, reemployment, etc. So G section III seems to be the only possibly relevant section under the term urgent concern, as it really speaks of a personnel action described in that section I just showed you, constituting reprisal or a threat to reprisal. That's prohibited under a different section in response to an employee's reporting an urgent concern in accordance with the paragraph. So I'm not exactly sure how this subsection applies. I would assume that given that the whistleblower was a CIA agent who was not appointed by Trump, that perhaps the term would not apply to that individual. So in short, this Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protections Report was produced exactly 1 day before the Ukraine issue broke, which is obviously extremely suspicious. It shows some degree of coordination within Congress to edit and change existing policies and procedures in order to inflict maximum damage on a well-known political opponent.